Okay, here we go. Right. Yeah, there's enough to talk about in Parshas, hopefully, Mattos-Masei. These Parshas are almost always double. Very, very rarely are they separate, unless you need to make sure that Dvarim is before Tisha B'Av. I think that's why they're going to be separate, almost always together. So the question is, why is the Parsha of Nedarim here? It seems to interrupt the narrative, although the truth is there are more questions. There are broader questions than that, because there are other things that interrupt the narrative as well. You know, the narrative is one continuous story between the end of Parshas Balak, which was the episode of Pinchas and the Benos Midjan, the daughters of Midjan, and everything else, and then Pinchas's actions, Pinchas's reward, and then the command to extract vengeance from the Midjanim. And then, of course, in this week's parsha, after the beginning of Nedarim, you have the actual war. So the question is, why is Nedarim? Why is the parsha of vows, right, and everything there? Why is that here after that episode of Bilam and Pinchas, and the story of the war itself? And this beautiful idea presented by Rabbi Weinfeld, I mentioned before, was the Rav, and he says the following thing. He says that we know in Parshas Balak that Bilam is given to the rest of the world as their novi, as their prophet, right? That was his great thing. Why? If we would have had someone as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, we also would have done the right thing, but we didn't, so we didn't have a chance. So therefore, they're given Bilam, and they have a chance. Now, the emphasis here is peh, on the mouth. Pischoin peh should not be an opening, should not be a mouth, the ability to say something, right? And we know that this concept of the mouth and the potential and the ability of the mouth is something that's emphasized again and again when it comes to the whole story of Parshas Bilam. That's what's going on, right? Why did they bring Bilam? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, they know his koyach, his strength is with the peh, the mouth, right? And therefore they bring Bilam, who also has the same potential with his koyach hadibur, his ability to speak, okay? And what does Bilam do? The opposite. He takes his mouth and he uses it to cuss. So the whole story of Parshas Balak, the whole story of Bilam, is a story of how you can use your mouth for good or for bad. That is what's going on there, right? What is the thing that makes us human over animals? So we know from the Targum in Bereshis, Targum says, "Vahi ha'odam lenefesh chaya," right? The man became a living thing, and the Targum famously says, "V'havas ba'odam leruach memalele," that we became a speaking spirit. That makes us nefesh chaya. That makes us distinct from the animals. The fact that we're able to speak. But of course, the potential and what our speech is depends on what we use it for. There's also an interesting connection with the fact that Bilam is the one who misuses his koyach hadibur, his potential of speech, and he also gives the advice to Midjan that their daughters should seduce the Bnei Yisrael, right? The Klal Yisrael, right? The whole episode of the daughters of Midjan. And there's a long-standing connection between the two, the concept of speech and the concept of znus. The Gemara uses the euphemism Ru'ah Medaberes Imploni. They saw speaking with someone when it's talking about suspicion and ksubas that someone might be a person who might be with someone else he shouldn't be with, etc., right? And then you have this whole idea in Chazal that Hachaim v'Hamoves b'yad haloshen, life and death are in the power of the tongue, and the same idea, of course, that life and death is literally life, the potential to create life or destroy life in terms of znus, etc., immorality. And therefore, what happens is, he suggests, is that this episode of znus, immorality, takes away the self-dignity, takes away the self-worth of the Jewish people. They lose their dignity because they've debased themselves and they've got involved in these terrible activities, right? What Parshas Nedarim does is it shows us the power we have through our speech to do good, and not only to describe reality, but to create reality. That's the remarkable thing about a neder, about a vow, right? Is you can actually, your speech has an impact, has a direct effect on the world. You actually create a new reality, right? And the idea being that Hashem created the world with speech, and so do we have the potential of speech, and we have the koyach to use our speech in the right way. But of course, what the neder represents, the vow, is that this depends on how true we are to our word and how we take what we say seriously. How do we take what we say seriously? Only if we have a true sense of self-dignity and of self-worth. You cannot take what you say seriously unless you treat yourself seriously. If you treat yourself and you have no sense of self-worth, no sense of self-dignity, then there's nothing. There's no power of speech. The power of speech, you won't believe what you say has meaning, right? And therefore, what's going on, he suggests, is that after this terrible episode of the Benos Midyan, the Jewish people need their self-dignity and self-worth restored. And what happens through the Parsha of Nedarim is it restores their self-dignity because it reminds them of the power of the gift of speech. They want to take revenge on Midyan, who debased themselves and have led to these terrible sins. And what they need to do is they need to rise above that. They need to rise above that through regaining their self-worth. And they achieve that through the Parsha of Nedarim, because that shows how powerful it is and what potential we have through the power of speech. So in other words, it's a necessary precursor to taking revenge against Midyan. How are the Jewish people? Why aren't they the same level? They sunk to their level. How are they going to so all of a sudden we're the antithesis of you, and we're going to take revenge and for all the terrible things you did to us? Aren't we the same level? The answer is no, because we've regained our self-worth by understanding the power of speech, understanding what the potential of speech is, right? The idea of raising that sense of self-worth and self-dignity, because the power of speech is the highest thing that can do that can allow us to achieve that, if you like. And that's what's going on. Again, the antithesis of Bilam as well. He also suggests that this is, if you look at the next parsha after the parsha of the war against Midyan. So it says, so when the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, they request land on the other side of the Yarden, okay? And what's interesting is the Roshei Hamatos make another appearance. So the parsha begins with the Roshei Hamatos, right? It is a description that they are given, the heads of the tribes, the heads of the Shvatim. It's described, the parsha of Nedarim is given to them, right? And one second, let's just find it. Where is it? Somewhere it says. No. It specifically says. No, let me find it. Somewhere it says it's where it says Kecholi Yitzem Yipichem Tasu. Maybe it doesn't say explicitly. I think it does. Yes. It's Pasuk Chof Ches. Pasuk Chof Ches. Although no, Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Chof Ches, it says that the description is given. It says like Moshe tells them. Although the words I hear Tzemi Pichem Tasu actually come beforehand. The Pasuk Chof Dalet. Moshe Rabbeinu says you should build cities for your children and pens for your flock over here. And Vayotzim Pichem Tasu, you'll guarantee that you will fight the battle and you won't leave us, right? You promise to do that, right? And basically it says at the end, a few psukim later, it says Vayitzav Lohem, Pasuk Chof Ches, and he commanded them about them. Who were the people responsible for this? So they are the ones, again, the Rosh Avos Hamatos, the heads of the Shvatim, they're the ones who take responsibility. They're the same people who receive the Parsha of Nedarim. They are the ones who can emphasize, because Rashi says, by Yitzav Lohem, really means to accept upon themselves. It says he appointed Elazar and Yeshua, right, about them and about the condition they had made. And on that, they were the ones who were appointed, because they are the ones who have taken on the significance and understood the power of speech. So they're the ones who are appointed to instruct that also to Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, to make sure they keep to their words, right? So this is just an idea in terms of how the linking of the parshas, how it works and what it represents. Just to stay on that, we'll come back to something else in a moment. Just to stay on the same point, Rashi says that in other words, to go on the what happens with the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, they request land on the other side of the yard. They're given permission as long as they take part in the battle, right? But of course, as we know, they incorrectly ask because they reverse the order. They say first we want to make sure they want to make sure that they want to build for their flocks, and then they say afterwards we'll build for our families, right? That's what happens. And Moshe Rabbeinu reverses the order. Moshe Rabbeinu reverses the order. So here you've got this on the Gidro Sonu. They say in Posuk Tes Zion, Paragon based on Tes Zion. Gidro Sonu we'll build pens for our sheep here. And then we will, and that's what they're in that order, right? First the animals, and then the cities for our children. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, build for your children, and then afterwards the flocks of sheep. And you shall do whatever comes out of your mouth, right? That is what you're supposed to. You have to keep to your word. Now Rashi points this out. Rashi on Posuk Design spells that out, right? The reversal of the order. Get your priorities right. First, make sure that you build for your families, only afterwards your flocks. But there's a Ksav Sofer who says the following thing. Nearly, someone who is always rushing after money, and he desires money more than himself, more than his own body. You can't believe his words. Because the Yetzer Hara of money will be so strong on him that he won't be able to fulfill his words. And therefore, Bnei Gad u'Bnei Reuven shekdimu behemos libneihem shechabavu hamom kol kach ein liftoach al divrayim. Because they desired money so much, because they prioritized their flocks and only afterwards said they're going to build for their families. Okay, so they got this wrong. This particular point they got wrong. They demonstrated they were prioritizing their financial possessions over their families. Okay, and by the way, there are those who talk about that. They say it's quite clear. It's one thing we don't necessarily realize when we learn this whole episode, which is spelled out in quite a lot of detail in the Torah, is that it seems that Bnei Gad and Reuven were affluent shvatim. That's what they were called. They were affluent tribes. They were coming. We have these resources, and the question was, how would they use them? Would they use them the right way? It says the Ksav Sofer, first build cities for your children. As Rashi says, right? In other words, get your priorities right. First build for your families, and then for your flocks. Once you've accustomed yourself to do this right and get the priorities right, then we can rely on your words, and you shall do whatever you said. So the Ksav Sofer adds a very beautiful piece to this Rashi. That Posuk Chof Dalet has three parts to it. Number one, build cities for your children. Number two, build flocks for your sheep. That can only come into play. Do whatever you promised once you got your priorities right. Because a person who has the priorities wrong and is only interested in their financial resources, well, unfortunately, sadly, can't be trusted. And that's why, and that's what the Ksav Sofer adds. Now, to come back, sorry, it's a little bit out of order. To come back, there's a beautiful idea in Drash Moshe. Moshe shares a deeper idea in the middle of the Perek Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Chof Aleph, in the middle of the Parsha detailing the battle against Midian. they had a question as to what to do with the spoils of war, and we learned there the process of kashmir. Yeah, Pasuk of Aleph, and then he goes on to describe how the metal elements you have to do in a certain way. It depends how it's used with fire, you kasher with fire, etc., etc. Water with water. The Rav Moshe says, why is it that here we have the word Zos Chokas HaTorah? This is the statue of the Torah. This is an unusual phrase. We know it's used in a few other places, like Parshas Chokas, but it's an unusual phrase. Why does it appear here? It's a chok. Why is it a chok of the Torah? It says like this. The concept here of kashering kelim is that even a person who has become sullied with averos, with sins, there's a way of fixing it. There's always a possibility of doing hagolah. I mean, you could argue that some kelim you can't do hagolah, but that's a different question. You can't earthenware, right? Whatever, you know. But the process of hagolah is designed to rectify problems. That's what it's supposed to do, and to be clean of any sin when a person does tshuva. And he says, therefore, that's why it says Zos Chokas HaTorah. Shezeu, says Rav Moshe, Zeu Chokas Kol HaTorah. That is the statue of the whole Torah. That is the lesson. That is the message of the whole Torah. Shlo Yisiyai Sha'odom Kishnizdam Shechota. That a person should never give up hope when he does the wrong thing. You with me? So that's why it says Zos Chokas HaTorah. It's saying this is the statue of the Torah. This is the message. This is the lesson of the whole Torah. The lesson of the whole Torah is you can put things right. You can do hagolah. You can kasher things. There is another interesting thing that he says. There's a chidush here. La'ofen agil mechatom alidei tshuva shulafita shmisha hagolosa. What do we learn from the parsha of hagolas kelim, kasher kelim? We learn that the way to kasher something is the same way the problem went in. Say kabolo kach polta. That's how it is, right? Something that absorbed in a certain way. That's how you kasher it, right? Something which absorbed through fire, it needs to be kasher through intense white hot heat, as those who are involved in kashering know, right? So it's complicated, it's more difficult to kasher, okay? And he says that is how it works with tshuva as well. This is a concept called tshuvas hamishkal. It's not necessarily understood or known so much about. Rav Moshe refers to it in other places as well. Tshuvas hamishkal. Mishkal is like weights or scales. That tshuva is dependent on the avera. There's a need to work out the tshuva based on how the severity of the avera or what the type of avera was. And sometimes there's a need to put it right through a corresponding rebalancing of the scales. Yeah, that's it's specifically to do with averas through taiva, through desire, whatever. There's a whole discussion of this in other places. So this concept you see and you learn from here as well. Okay, and another idea. I want to finish with another idea from Cheskel Weinfeld. Another beautiful piece. There are two Rishonim. There are many Rishonim to talk about it, but if you look at the Ksav Sofer and the Rishonim, the Kliyokar, you compare the Kliyokar and the Baal HaTurim. If you compare the Kliyokar, Rishon, I think on the question which everyone discusses of the reversal of the order of Motzoihem L'Maseihem. So Perek Lamed Gimel Pasuk Beis in Parshas Mattos-Masei. Vayichtov Moshe es Motzoihem L'Maseihem, Api Hashem ve'ela Maseihem L'Motzoihem. So you have the reversal of the order. Moshe Rabbeinu writes their journeys, their outgoings according to their journeys, based on the word of Hashem, and these are their journeys L'Motzoihem, when they left. So what is the change in order? And the Kliyokar has several different explanations. The first one, he says, is like this. You can look at it, it's the beginning on the Kliyokar on that pasuk. He asks the question, and he says, I'm going to tell you three different ways of understanding it. So just look at the first one. Sometimes they went forwards, and sometimes they went backwards. They went backwards towards Mitzrayim. So there were times in Parshas Devarim it says they had to go back towards the desert when they did the wrong thing. Because they did wrong, they had to turn backwards. Parshas Eikev it says, Rashi explains there they had to go back 8 stops. They went back 8 stops because of what they did wrong. Nimsa, he says, it comes out, the majority of their journeying was the correct direction, forwards, not backwards, and that was Al Pi Hashem. And therefore that was Motzoihem, L'Maseihem, that was their outgoings for the purpose of journeying forwards. right? You understand? They went out of the place where they were leaving, right? But Paneim El Maseim, and their face was forwards in the journey. And that was Al Pi Hashem, because that was according to the Ratzon Hashem. That was the will of Hashem. They were going forward. They were journeying to the next stop on their journey. But when they had to go backwards because they got the thing wrong, that doesn't say Al Pi Hashem, because it was their own sin that made them go backwards. And that's why it's their journeys to their outgoings. They went backwards. They went to the place they had just left. Okay, it's a pshat which fits very well with the pasuk. That's why you don't have Al Pi Hashem at the end of the pasuk, Pi Hashem at the beginning, because the first way around you're going forwards is the right direction. That's what Hashem wanted them to do, and sometimes they were Maseihem L'Mitzrayim. They went back to the place they just come out from. So that's the approach of the Kliyok. And the Baal HaTurim, if you like, has the absolute opposite approach. The Baal HaTurim says, Mitzrayim L'Maseihem, according to their outgoings, according to their journeyings. And after that, he asked the question why it reverses the order. Loma to say, Shakol Hoya Al Pi Hashem, that everything was Al Pi Hashem. Bein Masa, Bein Motza. Whichever way round it was, whether journeying, whether backwards or forwards, it was all Al Pi Hashem. Now, this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting, right? It was all based on Pi Hashem. So the question is, how do we understand this Baal HaTurim? In other words, it seems that what the Baal HaTurim is trying to say is not different to the Kliyakar, in the sense that he's also understanding that sometimes it was forwards and sometimes it was backwards. But his emphasis is that wherever they were, it was Al Pi Hashem, it was based on Hashem. Okay? And even if you say it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going backwards, but either way, it's both the journeying forward and maybe perhaps even standing still, the places they were leaving from. What is exactly what does the Baal HaTurim mean? So Weinfeld said like this, that there is a Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, and the Gemara in Shabbos says, you're only chayav for the malacha of sosa, for destroying something, if it's sosa almanos livnos b'mkoma. If you destroy something with the aim of rebuilding in the same place. That's the halacha, right, in the same place. Stira, which is purely destructive, destroying something for purely destructive purposes, is not also min haTorah. Also not also min haTorah. There's a whole discussion about it in the Gemara. Yeah, I think it's also Rabbanon, not also Torah. And the Gemara says, what is the source? The source, if the source of this malacha, like all other malachas, is from the Mishkan, okay, then how can we understand it, right? The Mishkan wasn't rebuilt in the same location, okay? So how could it be that the halacha is you're only chayav, you're only liable for destroying something if you have intent to rebuild it in the same place? The Mishkan was in different places, right? And the Gemara says because since it says that they always camped through the word of Hashem, it's like they knocked it down to rebuild in the same place. Because it was all based on Pi Hashem. Therefore, even though the Mishkan, they were actually taking it down and rebuilding it elsewhere, because it was all through the word of Hashem, it was all based on Hashem's command, it was as if it was in the same place. And this is very difficult to understand, because fundamentally, actually it's not. It's still in a different place. So how can you learn from this a halacha that you're only chayav on Shabbos if you knock it down to rebuild in the same place? Because what does it mean that because it was Pi Hashem, therefore everything is at the same place? So the Ibn Chananel says there, because when they disassembled the Mishkan, they didn't know if Hashem was going to rebuild it in a different location or same location, and therefore it was like it was the same place. But this is a difficult explanation, and Rabbi Birnbaum suggested another explanation. He says, what is the reason why a person is exempt from destroying when you don't have intention to rebuild in the same place, when you intend to rebuild in a different place? The answer is because it's makalkel, it's just pure destruction. Why? It's not pure destruction. I want to build somewhere else. The answer is because there are two aspects to every structure. You have the structure and you have the location, right? But both things are equally important. The building itself and where it is. Yeah, both things are important. If you destroy a building to rebuild it in the same place, you've kept both aspects of the building. You've kept the building and you've kept the location. If you lose one of them, you lose the location if you're building it elsewhere. You've lost part of the building. It's like if you buy a house, there was a location. It's the most important thing, right? So you've lost that element of the house. You can't recreate that. You've lost that element of the house. You've lost the location. You may have the building, but you haven't got the location, right? What about if there was a house, though, that needs to be in several different places? It needs to be. That's its function. That's its purpose. If that's the case, you're not losing the location, right? You're not creating something different. It's the function of this house. This house needs to be in all these different places. That's where it's meant to be. It doesn't matter that they're different places, because basically they are just different dimensions of the same whole effort. The whole place and the new place are all part of one effort, right? That's the whole purpose of the house. If I bring down the house here, to rebuild it over there, I'm not erasing. The present is not erasing the past, right? It's just adding it to make it the whole effort together. And therefore he suggests that when it says Mitzoyahem Lamasehem, the idea is that we're continuing, right? Departing, we're continuing with our journey. But at the same time, it's Masehem Lamitzoyahem. The journey completes where you're leaving from as well. It doesn't get rid of the departure point. Normally we look at a journey as if it's a linear thing. Forget about where I've been, I'm now somewhere new. But the journeying in the Midbar wasn't like that. It was that the new place complements the old place and makes the old place whole. It makes it into one piece. The journeys were al pi Hashem. They weren't stops along the way just to reach a destination. Each one had a purpose. Each place had its necessary purpose to make up this complete whole. And therefore, they leave one location, they settle in another. They didn't lose the previous location. They're taking it with them. That's the idea. And that's why he says that taking down the Mishkan and rebuilding it in another place is actually rebuilding it in the same place, because it's completing the original place. That is the unique nature of the journeying in the desert. It's one whole. They may have rebuilt the Mishkan in the new place, but by rebuilding in the new place, they add another block to complete the old place, and so to all of them along the line. That's how it is, right? And that's why. And there are different ideas in this, and that's one of the reasons we lane the 42 Masos in one go, right? You know that's brought down in Halacha. He brings to the Mogen Avraham, says the name of Tzra Amor, that the Keneged, there's a Hashem, which has 42 letters. And there are 42 stops on the journey, and therefore we always have to read them together. There's never a break. We don't break for Shem until after the Masos. In fact, when Masei is separate, there are some, it's been very unpopular, she'll have them in even during the week, I think, to lane all the Masos. We don't do that, I think. But you know what I mean? Then you don't break up the Masos, the 42 things. But certainly that's what we do it. That's how we do it, right? We don't stop at Sheni, even though it's double parsha. We go straight through, right? All of the journey, all of those things, all one complete thing. And also we lane it in a unique tune. You know, there's a special tune for the Masos. It's got a special tune, right? Okay, because again, it's got its own. It's like one flowing thing. It's got its own. It's all important. But together they complement each other. And therefore, the point is like this. In this journey, it didn't matter, in one sense, whether it was up or down, it was backwards or forwards, where they were going, whatever. Every step was crucial. Every step was crucial to make up a complete whole. Even at the very end, where do they end up? He suggests, where do they end up? Not in Eretz Yisrael, Al Yarden Yericha, by the Yericha. Okay, that's how it is. They're not even at the final destination. The final stop is by the Yarden, as if to say it's not about the destination. This was all about the journey. So the final point you'd expect to be in Canaan, but it's not. The final stop is Al Yarden Yericha, to emphasize that no, this is all about the journey. That's what it is. That's how it is. And therefore, this is, he suggests what the Baal HaTurim means. When the Baal HaTurim says everything was up to Hashem, maybe it is the same as the Kli Yakar, in the sense that they were journeying that was going forwards and backwards. But the Baal HaTurim says it was all up to Hashem, because ultimately it was all a whole. And he brings that the Degel Machane Ephraim, as a Chassidish Sefer, in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, says that every person has these 42 journeys, these masos in their individual life. And that's what we have to remember, that wherever we are at any point in life, that's what we're meant to be at that moment. And it's crucial to understand that that is part of the completeness of life. It's not about also a person's physical location. It could be where we are mentally or spiritually, etc., etc. It's all necessary. It's all part of a journey to make up the complete whole, right? Which is why ultimately, even the journeying backwards, whether it was a journeying backwards or journeying forwards, in this sense, it was all up Hashem. That's what the Baal HaTurim means. It's all that is the uniqueness of the journey. That was the uniqueness of the Mishkan always being in the same place. It was moving, but it was really all in the same place. That's the idea. Okay. Have a very good Shabbos. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.